The city sleeps, but some stories, they never do. Tonight, we're opening a file that's been cold for millennia. A case file on beings born not of flesh and bone, but of pure, smokeless fire. Let's get into our deep dive investigation. Case file number 72.
So, here's the real mystery, isn't it? The question at the heart of this whole thing. How did humanity take a force of nature, this ancient, deeply feared power, and somehow bring it to heel? I mean, who could possibly have the authority to tame the smokeless fire? That's the puzzle we're cracking open tonight.
Okay, here's the plan of attack. First, we'll build a profile of our subjects. Then, we'll get into the critical intervention that changed the entire game. We'll follow the evidence, from forced labor to their work as agents of justice. And finally, we'll see how this whole story gets twisted over time before we lay down our final verdict.
Every investigation starts with the subject, right? So first things first, we need to establish exactly what we're dealing with, or maybe who. Let's open the profile on these ancient and enigmatic beings known as the Jinn.
To really crack this case, we have to know what's on the slab. We're not talking about beings made of clay, like us, or of light, like angels. Nope. The Jinn are something else entirely. A civilization literally forged from a volatile, powerful, smokeless fire. And get this, they were here long before we were. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Just look at this chart. The Jinn, they occupy this unique middle ground. They aren't purely obedient like the angels made of light. But just like us humans made of clay, they have free will. And that capacity for choice, well, that's the key. That's what makes them so dangerous, and in the end, accountable. And here's their initial rap sheet. Before anyone stepped in to change things, the Jinn were the original power on the block. And this wasn't just some campfire story. They were a formidable force, feared and respected almost like gods. They were a law unto themselves. So what was their MO? A complete mastery of disguise. They could be anywhere, or anyone. This shape-shifting meant that any stranger you met, any stray animal you passed, could be an encounter with something far older and way more powerful than you. You had to be constantly on guard.
Every cold case has that one moment, that one event that changes everything. For the Jinn, it was the arrival of a new authority on the scene, a figure who is about to fundamentally rewrite all the rules of the game.
You have to imagine, for eons, the Jinn operated on pure raw volatility. They were a force of nature, with no higher authority to answer to. Their power was absolute, and their actions were dictated by nothing but their own whims. Yeah, a pretty dangerous combination. But that autonomy, that whole reign of fear, was about to get a serious challenge. A new power was rising, one that was sanctioned by an authority that even a being of smokeless fire could not dare to defy. And right here, this is the linchpin of the entire case, the divine mandate. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a battle of wills or strength. This was a top-down decree from the highest possible authority. King Solomon was given the celestial keys, and with them, he completely rewrote the power dynamic between us and the Jinn. And this slide, well, it shows the fallout perfectly. The Jinn were totally reclassified. You could even say they were demoted. They went from being feared as gods to being seen as lesser spirits, now subject to the same laws of judgment and accountability as regular humans. Their autonomy was officially over. So, let me ask you, what do you do when you're suddenly given command over an entire race of superpowered beings? Well, if you're King Solomon, you put them to work. And this is where we find the first hard evidence of his control. See, Solomon didn't just neutralize the threat, he repurposed it. He harnessed their unbelievable speed and strength, things that were way beyond human capabilities, and he turned them into this massive, unseen construction crew for projects on a totally impossible scale. And the primary piece of evidence for this, Exhibit A, the first temple in Jerusalem, a structure said to be built with a precision and on a scale that was just far beyond the tools of the time. This wasn't just a building, it was a statement. It was proof that even the raw power of smokeless fire could be tamed and put to a divine purpose. You know, this whole period of forced labor, it also exposed a key vulnerability, a major clue. For all their supernatural power, the Jinn still had earthly needs. They had to eat, drink, and sleep, just like humans. And that was a weakness Solomon could exploit, proving that even beings of pure fire had their limits. But Solomon's control wasn't just about hauling stones and manual labor. No, it was about integrating the jinn into a whole new moral universe, recasting them not just as workers, but as enforcers. From their so-called shadow geography, a kind of subterranean realm right under our feet, they became the ultimate unseen observers. They were repurposed as agents of cosmic justice, coming out to punish human arrogance and wrongdoing. Let's look at a classic case file that shows their new MO. You've got a greedy merchant who uses dark magic to summon a djinn, looking for a shortcut to wealth. But the djinn sees his spiritual weakness, his tired soul, as they call it, and it possesses him. The very gold he craved becomes his own personal hell, right before he gets dragged down into the shadows. Yeah, a pretty clear warning against getting too full of yourself. So, Solomon's divine binding set this incredibly powerful precedent. But power, once it's understood, can be copied, and it can be corrupted. So how in the world did we get from a king commanding legions by divine right to a kid rubbing a lamp for 3 wishes? This timeline right here, it tracks the slow decay of their power, their reputation. They go from these feared gods to divinely bound servants under Solomon. Then, in stories like 1001 Nights, they become magical tricksters bound by sorcery. And finally, in our modern era, they're completely sanitized into friendly, wish-granting genies. And the contrast, it's just stark. An independent agent of moral justice, a being that inspired real fear and respect, it was domesticated. The modern genie is a servant, a tool. The agent of divine law became an agent of wish fulfillment. The source of dread became a source of comedy. So here's the real takeaway from this section. This shift from communal accountability to just individual desire, it shows how we tend to demystify and domesticate the things that we fear. We took cosmic terror and we turned it into a convenient fantasy. The original terrifying power was basically neutralized. All right, we've reviewed the profile, the intervention, the evidence, and the evolution of the case. After looking at all the angles, what is our final verdict on the legacy of King Solomon and the smokeless fire? Suleiman's story really created a vital bridge. See, he didn't destroy the jinn, he integrated them into our world. He transformed them from this chaotic force of nature into a powerful symbol, a constant reminder that unseen forces are always present, and that with great power comes an even greater weight of moral responsibility. In the end, this case file isn't just about ancient spirits. It's a reminder that the world is filled with forces way beyond our perception, and it suggests that maybe, just maybe, our own moral conduct is the only real defense we have against the volatility of the unseen. The file on the smokeless fire is closed, for now.